The college football playoff committee always does a horrible job with their playoff ranking. So this year, I'm taking it upon myself to help the committee out. And no, they're not cutting me a check. I'm doing it for free. I'm going to give you guys my mid-season college football playoff rankings, all right? Now, these are going to look a lot different from most people's playoff rankings because I'm not somebody who's just going to crown the team just because they're undefeated. Like, I care about who you play, your strength of schedule. Like, if you're somebody like Michigan and you're just beating up on garbage teams, I'm sorry, but you're not going to get a lot of respect from me. And just a quick disclaimer, Michigan, where I have them ranked, a lot of you guys are going to be really upset, but you got to listen to my explanation for it, right? So at 25 through 21, I got Florida 5-2. Like, Florida is a really solid football team. And a lot of people counted out Florida before this season because they had Graham Mertz, and nobody really seemed to be a big believer in Billy Napier. Now, I'm not going to say I was high on Florida coming in, but I didn't think they were going to be a team that won only 5 games or less. You feel me? Like, I got a little bit more respect for Billy Napier. I watched this dude when he was coaching at Louisiana with the Raging Cajuns, so I'm a little bit biased towards him. And they got some pretty quality wins. Even though they lost to Utah, they recently beat South Carolina, and they still got a really impressive victory over Tennessee. James Madison is in that 24. They're 6-0. I think they're one of the best G5 schools in America right now. I mean, they went absolutely ballistic on Georgia Southern. And I kind of thought that game was a little bit of a coin flip. Now, I went with James Madison to win, but I didn't think they were going to crush Georgia Southern the way that they did. I mean, they got a high-powered offense. Their defense is pretty solid. So, James Madison, I got them in at 24, and it's really disappointed that even if they win their conference in the regular season, they may not be able to make it to the conference championship game or participate in the bowl game because they come from the FCS. And anytime you come from the FCS to the FBS, there's a waiting period that you got to go through until you're eligible to compete for conference championships and to be able to go bowling. It's really retarded. It's another reason why you should hate the NCAA executives or whoever runs this damn sport. But James Madison, they're 24 for me. Air Force is at 23. Like James Madison, they are a really good G5 program, and this is a really good Air Force team. This is probably an Air Force team that should easily get to 10 wins this season. Now, Iowa, they're at 22. Now, I didn't want to put Iowa on here because I don't really like watching Iowa play. Like, they're a boring team to watch. I mean, they're all defense, zero offense. And even when Cade McNamara was healthy, the offense still wasn't all that great. And it's like their defense tends to be their best offense. I mean, Iowa, even though, they're a terrible team to watch in terms of entertainment value, I respect the fact that they play true to themselves. They know who they are. They know they're not going to have a great offense. They're going to beat you with great defense, great special teams play, and win in the field position battle. And they recently just beat Wisconsin. So right now, they're in first place in the Big Ten West. Louisville, they're at 21. I know they suffered a really ugly first loss to Pitt, but I can't drop them out of the top 25 because that win over Notre Dame is still a really big win. And Louisville is still a really good team. Like, nobody expected Louisville to go undefeated this year. We knew that they were going to slip up eventually. And they probably will have a couple more losses before the season concludes. But they only got one loss at this moment. And they got a really big win over Notre Dame. So with that win over Notre Dame, I can't drop them out of the top 25. Now moving on to my next 5 teams. USC is at 20. They got dominated by Notre Dame on the road in South Bend. That was a really ugly game. And you can't even blame it on the defense. Like, everybody wants to put it on Alex Grinch, but, I mean, their offense had 4 turnovers. Caleb Williams by himself had 3 interceptions in the first half, which led to 21 points for Notre Dame. And then that doesn't include the other scoop and score that they got, and plus the special teams touchdown that they got off that kick return. So pretty much Notre Dame, defensively and via special teams scored 35 points thanks to the assistance of USC not being able to take care of the football. USC, I don't think they are an overrated team, but I do think that in terms of where they rank amongst the Oregons and the Washingtons of the Pac-12, I don't think they're up there. But that doesn't mean that I think that they're not going to have a shot to win that conference, because how many games are we going to see Caleb Williams have where he throws 3 interceptions? Not too many. All right, and I think Caleb Williams is going to bounce back. This is still one of the best offenses in college football. Their offensive line isn't as good as what we initially thought, but we got a lot of football to be played, people. And I think it's too premature to count out USC when they still got a really talented team. Like, we know they're not a great defense, okay? The reason why USC is because what they can do offensively. And I still don't really think that there's too many defenses in the Pac-12 that's going to be able to shut them down. I don't think Oregon's going to be able to shut them down, and I don't think Washington's going to be able to completely shut this team down unless Caleb Williams just has another stinker performance in those games. Tennessee is at 19. Now, I struggled with where I was going to put Tennessee because I don't really think they got a great win. You feel me? I think they're more hanging on to where their preseason ranking was. And they did lose to Florida also. And they got a really big test this week against Alabama. If they lose Alabama, they're done. Duke is at 18. Duke has a really good win against Clemson. And Clemson isn't on this ranking, but I have them on my top 50 teams list. And with the fact that Duke has a top 50 win against them, and they did play Notre Dame pretty close, I got them at 18. And they play FSU this week. Now, one thing about Duke, they're not a super talented football team, but they're well coached, they're disciplined, and they got a fantastic defense. So I think they're going to be able to hang around with FSU. I'll be surprised if FSU just clobbers Duke. Missouri is at 17. Now, Missouri, you got to remember that they got a really nice win against Kansas State really early in the season. Now, they did have a pretty ugly loss that kind of came out of nowhere not too long ago. Well, yeah, they lost to LSU, I believe, right? And they could have won that game, in my opinion. But they bounced back in a major way, beating Kentucky. And Kentucky was ranked in the top 25. And people equate, where a team should be ranked based on top 25 wins. It's not just top 25 wins that I'm going off of. I'm going off how many top 50 wins do you have? How many top 30 wins do you have? Missouri has 2 or 3 of them. And they're 6-1 right now. They got a really good offense. Brady Cook is playing some fantastic football. Luther Burden has looked like arguably the best receiver in college football this year. So look out for Missouri. I potentially think they could end up being the second-place team in the SEC East this year. And LSU is at number 16. Yes, they got 2 losses, but they may be the second best 2-loss team in America behind Notre Dame. They lost to Alabama, well, they lost to FSU, and then they lost to Ole Miss. But that was a really close loss, right? They beat Missouri, and I think LSU, even though they got a terrible defense, they're going to be able to hang around with most of the teams that they play because of how good Jaden Daniels and that offense is. So, yes, they got 2 losses. You may argue and say they deserve to be a little bit lower on the list. They still got better quality wins with that win over Missouri than what Duke, Tennessee, or USC have. Now, this is where things really start to get spicy, right? Utah is at number 15. I'm not that high on Utah. Yes, they beat Florida earlier, right? And you like the fact that despite all the injuries they have, they're 5-1. But they lost to Oregon State, okay? And even if Cam Rising comes back, when he comes back, Utah's schedule is about to get really tough. And I think that they're about to take a lot of losses within the next couple of weeks. Now, I'm not saying that their season is going to completely fall off the rails, but I'm a little bit lower on Utah than what most people are. They're banged up. They're just finding ways to win games. Eventually, when they end up starting to play some of the better teams on their schedule, they're not going to be able to hang around. Their defense may keep them around for a quarter or two, but you still got to be able to score some points. And Utah struggles to do that. Oregon State is at 14. They got to win against Utah. I'm not really all that thrilled with what I've seen out of DJ Uiagalelei, but I got them at 14. They're still in the mix. Notre Dame is the best two-loss team in America. All right. They got the toughest schedule in college football. These fools had to play Ohio State. Then they had to play Duke. Then they had to play Louisville. Then they had to play USC. And they're still not done. They still got to play a gauntlet of a schedule. So it's like Notre Dame, if they win out, they definitely could be in the conversation to be the first two-loss team to get into the college football playoffs. Because when you play a schedule this difficult, you got to get a lot of props for that. Meanwhile, you got schools like Michigan and people parading around like Michigan is just such a great team. Like, they haven't proven that. They've beaten up on garbage teams. Notre Dame, they're going out here and they're scheduling tough teams, and they got to play great teams every single week in and week out. It's no cupcakes really on Notre Dame's schedule. And they're 6-2. And they just destroyed USC. Regardless how you feel about USC, a win is a win. So they beat Duke. They beat USC. They were competitive with Ohio State. Yeah, they had a bad loss to Louisville, but it's like, look how damn tough their schedule is. So Notre Dame, I don't think they're completely out the mix yet in terms of them being able to make the college football playoffs. Ole Miss is lingering around that 12. Now, I wanted to drop Ole Miss a little bit lower, but I still got to respect the fact that they did beat LSU. And this is one of the best teams that Lane Kiffin has had in a while. Now, they don't play defense at all, but this is his most talented offense. Jackson Dart looks like a borderline Heisman candidate. You got great receivers. You got Quinshawn Judkins, one of the better backs in college football, and a pretty solid offensive line. Now, they're getting into the meat and potatoes of their schedule, right? And they did get blown out by Alabama. It wasn't really close. But outside of that loss, Ole Miss has looked like a really good team, and they're still lingering around in the SEC West division picture. If Alabama slips up a couple of times, they lose to Tennessee, they lose to LSU potentially, Ole Miss, as long as they don't suffer any more hiccups within conference, they could easily steal the SEC West from Alabama. Now at 11, I got Oregon. Oregon, I didn't drop them too far after losing to Washington because Washington is a great team. I had Washington winning the Pac-12 conference before this season began, and you guys can go ahead and check out that video. I got it up. It didn't really get a lot of views for some reason. I thought that it would because, I literally put in the title, the Washington Huskies are going to win the Pac-12 this year. Don't know why people didn't watch that, but whatever. Go ahead and check it out if you haven't already. And Oregon, they probably could have won that game if it wasn't for Dan Lanning's aggressiveness. His aggressiveness kind of got the better of him, and that's why they kind of lost that game. Now we get into my top 10. Now, this is where things get controversial, right? I'm going to just come out and say it. I got Michigan at number 6 because who the hell have they played? Nobody. I can't give you respect if you're beating up on bad teams, and I don't care about the metrics. I don't care about the point differential. You're Michigan. You're literally, supposed to be the second best team in college football. I expect you to beat up on Indiana. I expect you to beat up on Bowling Green. You don't get no brownie points for that. Ohio State has beaten Notre Dame. They beat Maryland. Both of those two teams are better than anybody that Michigan has played up to this point on their schedule. So it's yeah, Michigan is a great team, and them being at number 6 isn't because I don't think they are good enough to win a national championship. It's just that right now, going into week 8, they don't have any big wins that can make me put them in the top 5 over the teams that I have ranked ahead of them, right? The teams that I have ranked ahead of Michigan all have way better wins, and I've played way tougher schedules than what Michigan has played up to this point. Now, you can say, well, JT, Michigan can't help the fact that they got to play the teams in their conference. Okay, cool, but it's still I got to penalize you for it. I'm not going to give you brownie points for beating up on bad teams. At least Georgia blew out Kentucky. Kentucky is better than any team that Michigan has played up to this point. So I just got to get that out the way. I'm not hating on Michigan. It's just that they don't have a resume-building win yet for me to put them in the top 4 or the top 3. I feel like that's disrespectful to the teams that actually have played great teams and scheduled great out-of-conference opponents. You feel me? If you want respect out of me, you need to show it on the field, and you need to beat great teams. Now, I got UNC at number 10. I still am not a believer in UNC, but they beat my Miami Hurricanes. So I got to put them in the top 10, and I got to give them their props. Okay? That defense is playing fantastic under Gene Chizik. Like, this is the first time in forever that UNC has actually had a respectable defense. Drake May has looked like the second best QB in college football all year long behind Caleb Williams, and they got a really great team around them. Texas, I still think that Texas has one of the best wins in all of college football. Like, it doesn't matter if Alabama takes another loss or two, right? Winning on the road in Tuscaloosa is something that is still very hard to do. And not any team can go on the road and win at Tuscaloosa. You got to be a damn good team to do that. And yes, they did lose to Oklahoma, but that may be the best loss out of any team inside the top 10 on my rankings that has one loss on their schedule. So Texas, yeah, it's a little bit disappointing that they lost to Oklahoma, but they still got a really great win against Bama. And Bama, like, you may feel like they should be a little bit lower, but let's not forget, they beat Ole Miss. And ever since that Texas loss, I mean, yeah, they aren't really dominating the way that they used to dominate in the past, but it doesn't really matter. They're winning games, and they beat the tar out of Ole Miss. Like, I believe the score is 24-3 when they played Ole Miss? And if they beat Tennessee, you still got to have them in the top 10. Now, Penn State, I feel the same way about them that I do Michigan. And I love Penn State. I love me some Drew Aller. And I hope that they can get a big-time win, and James Franklin can finally get his big one against Ohio State this week. But same thing I said about Michigan. I can't put you in my top 5 until you can actually prove that you're capable of beating a quality opponent. And Penn State, like Michigan, has cruised through their schedule and haven't really played anybody that great. So until Penn State and Michigan can get some big signature wins on their schedule, I'm not going to have them in my top 5. Like, one thing that I think the committee gets wrong is that they don't penalize teams enough for not having great schedules. Like, I can't put you in my top 5 just because you're a talented football team. Like, the teams ahead of Penn State and Michigan are talented too, and they play difficult schedules. Like, Florida State, for example, they beat Clemson and they beat LSU. And if they beat Duke, they'll have 3 better wins than anything that Penn State or Michigan have up to this point. And I just think that having Penn State and Michigan ahead of any team that has better wins than them is just disrespectful. And you're a little bit delusional if you have Michigan and Penn State over any team that has played a tougher schedule than them. Like, I'm not just rewarding teams because they got a talented roster. Like, you got to beat some good teams for me to have you high on these rankings. And I know you guys are going to get upset with that, but that's just how I feel these rankings should go. Like, strength of schedule should matter. Strength of wins should matter. And Michigan and Penn State don't have any strong wins. Now for my top 5. I got Oklahoma at number 5. They got the best win out of any team in college football right now. They beat Texas when Texas was at their peak, and not a lot of people believe that Oklahoma will be able to get the job done. Now, they play Kansas this week, right? Kansas is a top 40 team to me. Even without Jalen Daniels, like, they're still a more than capable team. Now, I see somebody in the comment section says, I feel Michigan is a complete team. Like, Michigan is a great team. That's not what this is about. You can be a great team, but you still got to have the wins to go with it. You got to have the strength of schedule to go with it. And Oklahoma has a way better win beating Texas than what Michigan has. What is Michigan's best win? Michigan's best win up to this point doesn't compare to Oklahoma's or Washington. Washington just beat Oregon. Even though they beat Oregon at home, like, that's a top 10 team. So they deserve to be in the top 5 over a school like Michigan or Penn State. Like, this isn't about talent. It's about what have you done to prove yourself. You feel me? And Michigan hasn't proven that they deserve to be in this top 5 just as yet. You got to have the schedule. You got to have the resume, and you got to have the strength to win. That's what I'm going off of. And Michigan and Penn State don't have those yet. Florida State, same thing. Like, Florida State has wins against Clemson, who is a top 50 team, and they got a win over LSU, who's ranked. So you got Oklahoma, Washington, and FSU, who all 3 have played way more tougher schedules, and have way bigger wins to build up their resume than what Penn State and Michigan have. Now, Georgia, this is probably going to be where a lot of people are like, oh, you're a hypocrite. Like, you're going to penalize Michigan and Penn State, but you got Georgia at number 2. Are we forgetting that Georgia just completely dismantled Kentucky? Like, Kentucky is a 2-loss team, and they're better than any team that Penn State or Michigan have played. And even though Georgia has their hiccups and they have their moments, like, you know, they still are able to get up and play their best football against some of the best teams that they have to face on their schedule. So them beating Kentucky is a big win for them. Okay, like Kentucky, they're not in the top 25, but that's a top 30, top 40, top 50 win. And Kentucky is still better than any team that Michigan and Penn State have played. Now, you can argue and say that, you know, Georgia should be behind Oklahoma, Washington, and FSU. Okay, I can understand that. And I wouldn't even disagree with you on that. All right. Now, number 1, I got Ohio State. Like, Ohio State beat Notre Dame on the road in South Bend. They also have beaten Maryland, which I don't really know how great of a win that is anymore because those fools just got upset by Illinois. But Ohio State, you know, to their credit, that win against Notre Dame means a lot to me. So I got them at number 1. So these are my top 25 college football playoff rankings going into the middle of the college football season, or week 8. So you guys let me know how you guys feel about my playoff rankings down in the comment section down below.